Good afternoon. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. I am Clemmer Montague, and I am president of the James Renwick Alliance. We are a support organization for American craft and especially for the Renwick Gallery. And in supporting the Renwick Gallery, we raise funds, which goes for acquisitions. And tomorrow night, we'll be voting on two pieces. And if you want to go downstairs to see them, one is Ubaldo Vitale's Tuesday night. Excuse me. Excuse me. You have to have your treasurer around to keep you online. But Tuesday night, we will be voting on the acquisitions of Ubaldo Vitale's terrain. It's in the first gallery. I'll take a look at that when you go out. And Matthias Pliesling's Drift, the bench, which is in the palm court right underneath the staircase. So and that's what we do with part of our money. The second part of it is scholarship. We sponsor a fellow to research American craft in the museum, in the American Art Museum. We also the funds go for exhibition support, and there's another one, and I've forgotten. Education, which is what this is. And Katie Crooks over here is our coordinator with the Smithsonian American Art Museum and education programs. We've been doing this Distinguished Artist Series for a number of years very successfully. We bring in an artist to give a talk at the Renwick, and then one day it occurred to us, well, since we have them here and we're paying for all their expenses, why don't we make some use of their time? So we introduced a workshop. We're just using that as a general term on Saturday, where the artist does whatever that artist wants to, and then we decide to feed them that night, so we have a great potluck at some member's home. Yesterday, Judith's talk was on creativity, and after the talk, we went into the Washington Glass School's studios, and we made something. So that's what we're looking forward to today. The next Distinguished Artist Series is on the 19th of June with Cliff and Holly Lee. He is in the second gallery downstairs. The ceramicist, his wife is a jeweler. We'll be talking about how do you make a marriage work when both artists or when both people are artists. So we'll look forward to seeing you at that time. If you want to take part in our events on Saturday, which will be a workshop at Gateway Art Center with the Lees, then we'll be having literature out for that, and there is a small fee for that, so look for that. So now I'll introduce Novi Trump, who is in charge of the program today, who will talk about this terrific artist we have today.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming on this gorgeous, gorgeous Sunday afternoon after so much rain this week. We're so delighted to have Judith with us for this weekend. Judith has lived and worked in Philadelphia since graduating in '83 from the Rhode Island School of Design in the Glass program. She's exhibited widely, including in New York, LA, and Philadelphia. She's the recipient of many grants. The list is very long, so I'll only list a few. The Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 National Endowment of the Arts Fellowships and Crafts, the Tiffany Award, the Joan Mitchell Award, 2 Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Awards, and the Pew Fellowship and Awards, and a Leeway Foundation grant. Her work is in the collection of the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Corning Museum of Glass, the Renwick Gallery, and numerous other collections. Her work was included in the 2002 Whitney Biennial, and she is a 2008 USA Artist Rockefeller Fellow. And you are going to... You can say it. Yeah, you say it. I love it when you... I'll let you talk about it, sure, her upcoming plans. So without further ado, here's Judith Schaechter. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Novi, and thank you, everyone, for coming out. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you, Renwick. I love you. I have a piece in one of the Venice Biennale associated shows. That's what she was not saying. Anyway, I see a lot of familiar faces, and I hope I don't bore you. It's sort of embarrassing how much I enjoy talking about myself. I'll try not to go on forever. I do have 2 PowerPoints only because the one was a little unwieldy in terms of hogging memory. And for those of you who've heard the talk before, my life story has not changed, so I apologize. I'll try to make it colorful, though. Hey, AV people, do you have the mic that you need recording? All right, then. So, this is my very, very first piece of stained glass from the 1970s, one of those bake-in-the-oven sun catchers. I'm going to go back in time first and start at the very beginning. And I mean the very beginning. This is my family tree. That's my brother. Sometimes people think that's my husband. I'm not married. That's my brother. This is my father and my mother, and my father's family was Polish, Russian, Jewish, from Stary Sambor in the Ukraine. And my mother's family was from the United States, way, way, way back. And I just want to point out that in the back of this room, right back there behind, you see a group of 5 paintings on the bottom. The second from the right is a woman with a white hair bow. She is related to this man here, who is my great-grandfather. He would be a cousin of hers. That's Vinnie Ream, the artist. Her studio used to be in the White House. Check that out. Anyway, so I think one of the questions I get sometimes is, do I define myself as an artist or a craftsperson? And since I am unable to define myself as Jewish or Christian because of my background, I'm always sitting on the fence with something. So I think that my family tree really influenced my outlook on life. And I did a lot of research into it. This is not Pa and Ma, that's Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. And look at her. Don't you love her? She has no teeth. So I got very interested in my family in the Civil War, obviously on my mother's side. My father's from Europe and Ecuador. And specifically in the Civil War, and these are 2 of my Civil War ancestors. The piece, I'll be talking about the piece about this fellow in a few minutes, John Fletcher Hamlin. But if you're really interested, I am the president and sole member of the John Fletcher Hamlin Awareness Society. And there's a page on my website devoted to him, and you can read all his letters, which are in the National Archives. It's a really interesting story. There's a lot of drama associated with his life, although he was probably kind of boring. Although he ate worms to make people laugh. That's in his pension file. I guess I was always sort of an artist. That's me. And I also played in a couple rock bands. This is the same rock band, but I played in 2. That's a very good way of losing one's fear of public speaking. I was a nerd in high school. You can see I could not be bothered to submit any sort of explicatory information. I think I was too disgruntled. Some of the things that influenced me as a child, I have images of. The Wizard of Oz. I think my mother was from Oklahoma, and there was the whole mythology surrounding that seems to have affected me. I love the original illustrations too, especially because Dorothy looks so jaundiced. My father used to take me to I grew up in Boston. My dad used to take me to the Boston MFA. And I remember seeing, I'm not sure this is the exact image of St. Hippolyte that's in the Boston MFA. It might be. There's one very similar. And I remember seeing this and images like it. And this was way before anyone thought to protect their child against scary images. So it was completely normal to be dragging your kid to see this kind of thing. And I remember I'd be like, I can't look. I can't stop looking. But I know that the way memory works is that you end up making a story about a story and it's all very false. But my memory is that seeing images like this was the very first time I understood that art was powerful. And that it was incredibly powerful, not just a little bit powerful, but amazingly powerful. This is a set of shrunken heads from the Woolaroc Museum outside of Bartlesville, Oklahoma, a place I visited a lot in my youth, and also as an adult I've been there. I remember absolutely loving these shrunken heads and wishing that my dolls looked more like that. Now, this image is from a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale called The Girl Who Trod on a Loaf. And this image was also very haunting. And I think, maybe some graduate students someday will want to explain how this image is so crucial to understanding my work. I think they're all kind of derived from this one image to some extent. And by the way, the quote says, "Tears of sorrow shed by a mother for her child will always reach it, but they do not bring healing. They burn and make the torment 50 times worse." I often think back and I wonder how it is that I came to be a stained glass artist, because I thought I was going to be a painter. And the only thing I can really think of is how much I enjoyed my Light Bright toy, which I really loved, Light Bright, and also color forms, but not the ones with the pre-made pictures. I just like the ones with the abstract shapes. And Spirograph, I absolutely adored Spirograph too. I was a doll abuser, and now, all dolls need haircuts, everyone knows that. But I had to chop off their hands and their feet because I was sewing clothes for them, and they were tight, and they wouldn't fit unless I chopped off their hands and feet. And the bruising is actually not my fault, really. The bruising is caused by the wires oxidizing in the figure, but I do think they're fabulous looking. I also think that in terms of my mature work, and I use the word mature very, very loosely here, I think that the scale of the heads to the bodies and the size of the figures and all has to do with dolls, not babies, as psychiatrists have opined. Although dolls, babies, I remember my mother telling me when I was, 10 or so, that I would someday grow out of playing with dolls, and it was just horrifying to me. And to comfort me, she said, "Don't worry, Judy, you won't miss it, because that's part of growing up." And it's like, you know what? I'm still playing with dolls. So there. Here's some of my very, very early work. My mother kept it all, and she labeled it. Now, I think I am pathologically terrified of vomiting. I try very hard to not puke ever. I think I apparently ate the contents of my mother's ashtray when I was a toddler, and they had to have my stomach pumped. So I think I have some sort of learned fear response to that whole thing. But some of these pictures, I think, will prove to you that I have not developed yet artistically. This is from 1999, I think. It's called Child Bride. I was a child bride. I got married when I was 39. I designed this piece because I thought, in all honesty, I thought that I had the world's greatest idea to do a woman barfing a bouquet of flowers. Several months later, I remembered that my friend Susan Hagen had just done a wood carving of this called Green Woman. It was a real triumph of self-deception, because I would never have felt okay about doing the same thing as my friend. And I'm sure what happened is I saw it, I was like, oh my God, what a killer idea. And then my brain kindly allowed me to have total amnesia, and I thought that it was my idea, so I made it. And anyway, Susan is a lovely person, and I told her I would show the picture in lectures. So there you go, Susan Hagen, woodcarver from Philadelphia. And close up. This is Winston Churchill in his coffin. I watched the funeral. We lived in England for a year when I was 4, and I was watching the funeral. I'm not political at all, really, but I think that I was quite affected by seeing it, and very concerned that Winston was cold in the coffin. So these shapes are blankets and pillows. For a long time, I I dealt with the idea of figure and ground, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with the idea in painting or in two-dimensional image making. You have a figure, and then there's this extra stuff, like extra paper, or you got to put it somewhere. It's not sculpture, which exists in our plane of existence. And that's called the figure-ground problem. So for a long time, the only way I could really cope with that was to imagine that the canvas, as it were, was a coffin. And I did a lot of things on that theme. Also, I'm born on Valentine's Day, so there's a lot of Valentine imagery. See, this is a heart-shaped wreath. This is called Dead Lion, from my youth. When I went to RISD, I guess Novi said I went to RISD. I really did. I don't have a master's degree, so I just have an undergraduate degree from there. And I had gone there fully with the intention of being a painter. I don't think that many people at that time, or even today, know at that young age that they want to do something as obscure as glass. And I had self-identified as a painter for many years. I took classes at Saturday workshops and at the Boston, what's that school up there? Mass College of Art as a high school student. I went to RISD's pre-college program and painted. So when I went to RISD, I was going to be a painter. And this is one of my first paintings. It was about 6 feet by 4 feet. And here's some glassworks on the same theme of cats. These are really, really old. Also, frowning princesses and queens are something I did. I think you can see a little bit that I was dyslexic. I think there's a better slide of it coming up. I'm still interested in the theme of unhappy royalty. You know, I don't have to show you this. It's downstairs. But if you're interested, I have to wait because whatever is next is a big JPEG. Oh, there's the sketch. So this PowerPoint I just gave, I was just teaching in Canberra, Australia, and their semester is all oriented around the theme of bestiary. So I put in a lot of extra animal imagery, just in case you're wondering. That's the dead unicorn. I drew that by looking for images of upside-down horses. And of course, I was very interested in ripping off the unicorn tapestry. I would have also liked to have been a tapestry artist, because there's no medium too tedious for me. Here's some close-ups. This is what that piece looked like while it was in progress. So that background, I don't want to go back to it because I'll have to go through that big JPEG again. But the background that appears to be black on red is actually a carving into blue glass that is layered on a piece of red. And I'll be talking more about technique as I go. Now, multiplication table was influenced by my intense interest in mathematics. This up here is a math times table that I did when I was 4. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a very, very perfect, faithful representation of what math looks like to me to this day. And I put that in with these images of sort of kaleidoscope things that I do. This is at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York, and it's one of the very few architectural pieces I've made, and it's also enormous. I've been asked before if the Museum of Arts and Design asked me to tone it down a notch with these screaming women. And no, they did not. I was actually, they didn't say anything at all. I just wanted to make this window, so there. Like I said before, I've always liked spirograph, and I spent some of my incredibly sexually frustrated adolescence tatting lace, which is the really best way to use that energy I can imagine. This thing is like this big, and it takes about a month to make it, because it's tatted, and tatting is all little tiny knots. This is Superman and Lois Lane, a series of works I did at an early age. I was absolutely obsessed with Superman, and apparently Lois, too. I just wanted to show you that. I've never done that again. This, when I was a teenager, I also used to draw beauty contests with my girlfriends. We'd sit there and we'd draw beauty contests all the time. And this is a work from about 1998 of a beauty queen that's been kicked out of a car on prom night. I don't always have a narrative like that for these images, but I feel like I have to explain why I inserted that next to the picture of the beauty contest. My brother had a huge impact on my life. This is him right here. He was born a perfectly normal child, but when he was about 9 months old, he got encephalitis. And the encephalitis affected the Broca's and Wernicke's area of his brain. And that affects ingoing and outgoing speech. So basically, his cognitive areas of my brother were knocked out. And as a result, he does speak. He's very intelligent. But his speech has been rerouted by very ambitious nuns to other parts of his brain. And he was taught they taught him by like the way you teach a deaf person, by holding his throat and feeling the air expel. Anyway, so when he was about 7 or 8, or however old this child is, I'm no good at gauging kids' age, he decided he wanted to build a barn. Now, a lot of times people don't understand, and they think that why didn't he just draw a picture of a barn and point to it and, go like, me, barn, want to build, or, maybe pantomime. But he had no database for communication. He did not understand that when people were talking to each other, what was happening was communication. It was just noise. So anything he wanted to do, he had to just try and do. So what he did was he had to trash pick wood and just start building. Now, my father did build this really atrocious A-frame. I don't know who's the worst builder, because we were playing in that thing and he didn't want us to get killed. But he then constructed this amazing, fantastic piece of virtuoso folk art. Probably this is the McEvans house. I'm sure they did not like it, but it was brilliant. And just to demonstrate the horrible interface between verbal skill and artistic skill, one of the first things I remember him saying was, when he could talk, was, "Hey, that doesn't look like a barn." And they tore it down and built this hideous shed. Can you believe it? Oh, well, it lives on in pictures. I was going to offer it to the Smithsonian, but alas. And don't you love that part of it? And I just want you to know that he's wearing a harness because after he built the barn, he became obsessed with parachuting. And he had this fake parachute that was a sheet on this harness and he'd run around the backyard. I, too, wanted to be an architect. I specialized in castles and orphanages and prisons. This is an orphanage. I wanted to be an architect, and I think that I would have pursued that, but someone with a mere sentence canceled that plan because they said, architecture has math involved, and that was that. I was just like, oh, well, forget that. A few years ago, I got a grant to learn how to do 3D digital modeling because I like any technique as long as it's not in the middle of something. So I like really ancient technique from like the 12th century, and I like technique that's from tomorrow, but everything else in the middle, no thank you. I was modeling my ultimate virtual dollhouse, and this is the attic garret with a pea-stained mattress. I just want you guys to know that in 3D computer modeling, you can't hit a button and generate like anything. You sculpt it out of cubes. It is absolutely analogous to sculpture, although it's not hands-on unless you consider your hand on a mouse hands-on. But I thought when I got involved in this that I was going to be able to like click a button and a sort of Gumby figure would come out and I could sort of retrofit it to my expressive needs. Little did I know I would be taking cubes and like stacking them on each other until I had something that looked realistic. That was really hard, but really, really fun. I eventually, this is the bathroom from my dollhouse, and I put a goat in the bathtub. That goat is actually animated and has a fully articulated skeleton inside it, and it could be turned into a cartoon of some sort. But the one thing I loathe about computer technology is that they do things like, this is done with Maya software, which is how they made the movie Shrek. Autodesk, I guess it was, sold it to Alias, and now they've redesigned the program. This was a program. When you launch a computer program, you have what's called an interface, the thing on your desktop. Maya has 5 interfaces. So you're interacting with, 10 trillion cajillion possibilities of how to manipulate things. And they totally redesigned it when they sold it, and I didn't get the new program, and I just was like, you know something? I'm 50. I have to make decisions. And I decided not to continue with this, and that was absolutely heartbreaking to me. But stained glass has been very, very good to me. This is some examples of my early painting. When you go to RISD, your sophomore year, you declare a major, and they have you painting still lives and naked people, and nudes, and landscapes for a semester. And this is from my imagination. It's actually based on a tarot card. After that semester, you're on your own, and you're supposed to go find your artistic voice. This was very, very, this is a crisis for a lot of people. And I will tell you that this painting comes after I found stained glass, because finding my voice was absolutely contingent on working in glass. But I'll get to that in a second. I do want to address the issue of like this incredible violence that I could just be glib and not say anything about it, but I love you all so dearly and personally. I don't want to be disingenuous. So when I had critiques on work like this, the number one thing that my critics said was, you're just in it for the shock value, Judith. And I would say, oh, no, I'm not in it for shock value. But now I think I was. I would not say I was the happiest post-adolescent out there. Should I stand back from the microphone? And I was getting my rage on, if you will. But I was really, really pleased to see people sort of recoil in horror from my early work. The one thing that happened, though, was that there is, as in pornography, there's a certain desensitization. And the more I would do a painting that was shocking, and the next time, if it was the same audience, you have to ratchet up the violence to get the same effect, like an addiction. And I eventually did a painting that was so repulsive, I couldn't finish it or look at it myself. It wasn't this one. And that was the end of that. Talk about diminishing returns. I then was able to say, all right, well, I guess I saw where that led. And then I was able to probe more deeply into what interested me about human nature. And it's really not just, depicting humanity at its worst. So what happened when I took the stained glass class that changed my life is, as you all know, stained glass is just junk, whereas painting is a time-honored, very serious, profound pursuit, right? That's what I thought. To me, stained glass was for hobbyists. It was trivial. I had no respect for it, except that I had an uncanny urge to do it. Meanwhile, in the painting department, I had the following problem. I would loathed blank canvases. I would start out with a blank canvas, and I was in absolute awe of the tradition of painting and all the unbelievable paintings there are in art history and everything people have done with it. And I would get very inhibited. And so I would immediately cover the canvas with a whole bunch of stuff. And I have ADD. Maybe you've figured that out already. But so I would cover the canvas with stuff, and then I would proceed to gesso over the unimportant parts. And yes, you've guessed it, I ended up with a blank canvas again. And this was very bad. So at the same time, I was taking this elective, and in something that I had no respect for, basically. My whole life, I had been doodling, and almost obsessively doodling. Like, I wouldn't just have a doodle here and there. I mean, the pages would be covered, and it would be, my math homework and stuff like that. And I would always get these back from the teachers saying, like, stop doodling in the margins of your paper. So I understood that doodling was very bad. And when I took the stained glass class, I had the same problem as in painting, and that is I needed a subject. So I thought, well, this is junk, and this other stuff is junk, so I'm just going to do that junk. And that was the moment. It was like, the last scene in The Wizard of Oz. I had been looking everywhere to find my voice, all over Oz. And the whole time, it had been right there. And that was the moment that I became uncritiquable. I should just sing it. Because nothing anyone said could possibly persuade me that this was not the absolute right path for me. It was just too good. I mean, you can tell me forever that, like, my painting teacher used to say, like, figures are for illustrators, and patterns are decorative, and decorative is bad. And I remember crying and thinking, I guess I'm not an artist, I'm just an illustrator. And it's like after I made the connection between my doodles and what art was, he could tell me that all day long, and it would be like, la, 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 not hearing you, because it was just too rewarding, basically. This is from 2008, the Crafts Faculty Meeting Agenda. I now carry around a plastic laminated article in my wallet about how doodlers are listening better. I don't really, but I've thought about it. I think they should make doodling licenses. And this is how I generate most of my work. Boy, that was lengthy, wasn't it? This is my first official stained glass window. This was supposed to be a cat skeleton, but like anyone who works for the very first time in a highly technical craft medium, I had no idea what the medium was doing. People think that you have an idea and then you make it. What actually happens is you have an idea and then you touch materials, and the materials just start shouting at you about their needs. It's like, no, I'm black flash glass. I'm not going to do that. My early work was leaded, by the way. You can see this is assembled with lead cane. It's now copper foil. And I just, there's nothing more obnoxious than an incredibly egotistical, self-absorbed artist like me, but I was looking at the Lafarge in the American Museum yesterday. I copper foil better than him, okay? I really do. This is 3 separate pieces from when I was a student. That has a blown glass element, and I do not blow glass myself. Sometimes I say that and people go, oh. I also told my uncle that I work with an assistant occasionally. I work with an assistant maybe once every 6 months. And my uncle said, Judy, I don't know how you can call that work your own. This is an older work that I redesigned in the late 1980s, maybe 1990 or so. That was based on a dream I had, like a night terror, where I had a dream that I was at the end of my bed looking up at the wall, and there was this giant wolf head. And I woke up, and lo and behold, I was actually at the end of my bed, which was really scary. So I graduated from RISD, and I was going to quit all that foolish glass stuff because God knows it's difficult to set up a studio, and glass is not important like painting is, and all that. And I I couldn't stay away. I did my last painting, I think, around 1988. I remember the last painting. It was, I think what was happening was that I was really able to fully express myself in glass, and painting became more or less obsolete. This is the source I was shamelessly robbing from to make this piece, King of Maggots. There's no sandblasting in that one because I did not have a sandblaster yet. Oh, and the cat broke the head. My father owns that one. This piece is called Beehive Hell. I'm just going to run through some of the older work. I'm not really going to talk about it. I will say that I got the idea for Meat Man watching the movie Hellraiser 2, but it wasn't so much the imagery as the idea of combining orange and red glass to make the figure. And this piece was based on Courbet's painting Young Lady on the Bank of the Seine. Now, my other uncle, that first was Uncle Dick, Uncle Bud, said to me, Judy, they're from Oklahoma, why did you do a piece with a girl with her panties chewed off? And I said, Uncle Bud, everyone's opinion is very important to me, yours included. I didn't say anything more than that. This piece is called Fragile, and this is from 1989. This piece is very small. And it was sort of a groundbreaking piece for me, though. And I think I graduated in '83, and I think by 1991 and 90, I was hitting stride for the first time. One thing I didn't really understand about creativity, which I said in the workshop yesterday, was how cyclical it was. I had gone through the horrible agony of figuring out who I was as an artist in art school. I never imagined that I was going to go through that many more times in my life, and I did. And it may look, when you look at my work, like it's consistent and the work of one person, or actually it may not, I don't know, but I will tell you that I may come to the same conclusions, but I'm often coming from a different place. This piece was in the first time I exhibited at the Renwick in 1990. I was a mere 29. Oh my God, so young. This was a response to the culture at the time of people going on Jerry Springer and Oprah to tell their stories of, a lot of times they were sort of fabricating these memories about child abuse and stuff like that. It was just, it was constantly in the media. It was all over the place. So the monkeys are going, wah, 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 wah. It's a really cynical piece. This, on the other hand, couldn't be less guileless. This is called I Still Believe in Love. And I was thinking about the covers of romance books. Do you know, you guys, there is a blog called Women Running from Houses, and it's just jackets from like pulp books aimed at women, of women running from houses at night in nightgowns. There's like 10,000 of these images. I love stuff like that. If I come across a sort of a meme like that, instead of going like, oh, how corny, must avoid, I think, how can I make that exciting? Because it's got to be valuable to people. Otherwise, people wouldn't keep lusting after that stuff. So this is like the cover of a romance book. She's heading to her love somewhere. I'll tell you, this also marks the beginning of when I started to sort of really aggressively redesign my pieces during making them. So the original sketch for this has all these dragons in the picture plane with the girl. And I made it, and it was boring, it was sort of expected. And then I had the idea to segregate them into a diptych, a sort of awkwardly not quite even diptych, just to make sure that you're still looking, just to be irritating. See, instead of now shocking people with ultraviolence, I just want to be irritating by setting this line off by an inch. That's much worse, isn't it? This piece is called When the Hunter Sings, the Birds Take Wing. It's very 3D. The birds come up at an angle off the surface to about an inch, inch and a half. And this piece is called Someone to Mourn Over Me. I was starting to look at Japanese prints. There's some by Yoshitoshi that were just really gross. I got very interested. I was also trying to create a sort of rhythm between her hair and this flame. But for a while, I don't know if it's how many pieces you'll notice, but I got really obsessed with putting the heads in upside down. Another thing I'll tell you about my figurative work is, which is 99% of it, I almost never crop a figure. So I think I have object permanence issues. To me, to crop a figure is to commit violence to a human body. So pretty much it's believable. I mean, obviously it's two-dimensional, so you can't see the whole body, but it's believable in that space, but I'm not cutting off a foot with the frame. Except here, oops. Well, he's a demon, so that's what he gets. It's called Feeds on Fire. A lot of these also respond to music. I remember I was listening to some college radio station at the time, and there were a whole bunch of songs by women about fire. And I wanted to do my contribution. Also, there was a long time where I was interested in technical challenges. Like with stained glass, you have to cut the glass out into these discrete shapes and then assemble them. So the hardest things to do are stuff that flow, like smoke and water. And I got very interested in doing stuff like that, because where are you going to put these things, right? This is The Little Dead Mermaid. Around this time, the movie The Little Mermaid came out, and just had it up to here with fairy tales and their optimism. The optimism of fairy tales has ruined my life. Did I mention I'm divorced? This is called Toads. I think that it probably bears mentioning that a lot of this stuff that deals with horrific imagery, like sticking a rocket in a frog's mouth, it has a lot to do with how repugnant I find stuff like that. It's almost stuff that I can hardly bear to deal with, and maybe I'm trying to cope by making images to some extent. This is called Cutie Pets. This is a cat so ugly it makes flowers die. This is the tragedy of getting a really awful birthday present. This is a wolf in sheep's clothing. A cat terrified of its own toy. I think the one thing I said to the people about animals when we were discussing bestiaries was that I think animals can carry, at least for me, being an unbelievable cynic, you know, humans do horrible things to humans, but when people do bad things to animals, oh my goodness, I have zero tolerance for that, none whatsoever. That's, I don't know, we kind of deserve it, but animals, no. Now, oftentimes I've had real horrible issues with creative block. I'm quite a perfectionist. When around this time, I did the piece that I showed you in conjunction with Winston Churchill in the coffin, the girl in the coffin with the heart-shaped wreath. That sort of represented a pinnacle of achievement for me at the time. And there was no outdoing that for me. And that was the second time I had to reinvent myself as an artist. It was really a crisis, because I always want to do better than the one before. And there was no doing better than the one before, so what to do? So what I did was I decided it was okay to make horrible garbage. Just like when I first started in stained glass, I gave myself permission to make trivial junk, like this piece, which I love. You see, we've got fetal Satan here, and a dog with an ice cream cone. Pie dog over here. And around the same time, that exercise really tends to loosen me up, and I tend to be pretty pleased with the things that I think are junk. I did this piece at the similar time. I was also looking at a lot of Japanese prints, which I never got it when my art history teacher said, oh, and then they were influenced by Japanese prints. And I'm like, why? But one day I opened up a book and I was like, oh my God, I get it, I get it, I get it. And then I just wanted to do nothing but that. And flip-flops. I'm so not really interested in looking at people's feet, but especially like their icky toes. But flip-flops are just so graceful on the right foot. My cat, Dee Dee, passed away, and I had seen this Russian cartoon. I guess it's some kind of political cartoon. And I wanted to make a memorial to Dee Dee. To be honest, I love cats, but I had never really bonded with Dee Dee, so I think I had a lot of guilt. And so I gave her a really awesome funeral. It's a jazz funeral. This was done by taking linoleum blocks and putting glass paint on it and sort of smacking it down. There's only 3 mice, a big, medium, and small mouse. And I painted the details in to make them look different. And then my self-portrait from 1995. This piece came to me in a flash. I don't have visions or anything, but every now and then I just get a flash of inspiration all at once, so I can't explain it very well. And this image really is that shape. This is my Greek pottery phase. And this is 1997. I designed this piece. It's one of my all-time favorites. And I think I was teaching at the Pennsylvania Academy, and there was this one student who was doing these sort of whirling donut shapes in the sky. They were really abstract. But I realized later that I had the figure drawn out. I didn't have any idea of what to do for the ground. And this is something that happens to me all the time. I almost always have the figure drawn out and have it even made in glass before I know what I'm going to do with the background. So sometimes what I do is I just look at it and sort of ask it what it needs to be resolved. And I had an image of this whirling donut in the sky, like this student was painting, and it became this wreath. Now, with hindsight, I think it looks like a crucifixion with a crown of thorns. But I didn't have that in mind when I designed it. Now this, on the other hand, I had been thinking of doing for a long time. If I have an idea like that, I have to wait until the right drawing spontaneously issues forth from my fingers, because, well, I do draw 2 ideas on occasion, but often they come out really stiff. So I just waited, and one day this drawing just happened. It's a very small piece. And now I will talk to you a little bit about technique. First of all, I will say this section here fits perfectly over here. I always stick the figure in the middle, so I thought I should do something different and put the figure on the far left. So I made it, and it looked terrible. So I chopped it off. And it looks pretty good without the left-hand side, but so much work went into it. I figure, all right, this is just like cubism now. This is called farmer plus scarecrow equals pietà. Now, the way I work is with a type of hand-blown glass made either in France or Germany. And the glass has 2 layers of color on it. This type of glass is called flash glass. And you can engrave into the layer of color to reveal what's underneath. The easiest way for civilians to understand this is that it's kind of like a cameo. Now, when I say this to a crowd of glass people, they look at me and they go, no! But just think cameo. So, believe it or not, this here is a piece of red on clear glass that I have done all kinds of different types of carving into. The black is glass paint that fires on in a kiln. Then there's a layer of brown on clear and blue on clear. And when you stack them all up, it looks kind of like that. I have numerous examples, which I will get to in a minute. But this is just the section of the scarecrow to show you sandblasting it in stages. You don't do it all at once. And the sandblaster is a very crude instrument. It is not like an airbrush. You have to go back into it with finer tools. I use a flexible shaft engraver for you tech nerds, and also diamond files. I was using the flexible shaft one day, and it was too rough, and I thought, it's a diamond tool. It doesn't have to be plugged in. It'll mark the glass perfectly well, not plugged in. And that's great. That'll take 1,000 years. That's perfect. So I stopped plugging in my diamond tools. This shows the layers of paint. Glass painting is a great medium for people with ADD because every time you put the glass in the kiln to fire the paint on, you get to surf the internet. That's the rules of glass painting. It's in the book. So I try to do a lot of layers. This only has 3. But the paint, you can make it oil-based, but I use it with a water base. So you can't paint a lot without removing what's there. So you have to fire it and do it in sequence like that to build up the color. I'm very, very fond of tedious techniques. I think what was happening with the painting was I was not able to emotionally transfer to it. It was agitating my ADD, and basically I would just want to throw it out. The glass, on the other hand, it took at least a week to get it to do anything at all. And in that time, I had developed such strong emotional feelings for it that I was damn well not throwing it in the trash. So that was part of the epiphany of glass as a technique for me. Maybe if I had learned how to glaze like the old masters, I would be a painter. But no, it was just going to be a primal confrontation between me and a canvas, and that was not happening. This piece, I went to Pilchuck, and I like to go jogging, and they told me it was fine to go jogging in the woods as long as you don't get between a mother bear and her cubs, because mother bears are very protective. And this is a bear stealing a woman's baby. I have this section here to show you, pulled apart. It is 3 pieces of glass. There's no cut lines in it. It's just all manipulated. Kind of like the color separation for a print. I like to do the painting on the red glass because it's very stable and predictable in the kiln. The pink will change colors sometimes. The blue's pretty good. So I think a lot of times people look at images like this and they think that I have some sort of foregone knowledge of what that is going to come out like. And I want to emphasize to you, not only do I not know ahead of time, but if I know, I am so bored that I have to do something else because I very much want to learn something from these pieces. I don't want to learn that I can make my idea, duh. I want a whole new direction. So if it comes out exactly the way I imagined, I just trash it. This clearly didn't come out the way I imagined. And I have some examples of this piece to show you how the different stages it went through of designing it. This is called A Ship on Her Shoulder. This old art test, for a while they were republishing it in this sort of graffiti art magazine called Juxtapose, and they would invite contemporary hip artists to contribute. They did not invite me. I did send one in anyway, which they didn't print, and that was mine. Now, eventually I turned the figure on its side. Now, as you see on the right there, it is the exact same figure. It's just turned. And the boat, I removed it in Photoshop and stuck it on the pirate's back. That's from a Baroque allegory of water. Then I turned it into a woman. A lot of times I get asked, why are all your figures women? And I will tell you, because I am one. And they're not self-portraits so much as they are playing with dolls and maybe playing with identities. But another aspect of emotionally transferring on one's artwork is I have to be able to identify with the characters very, very strongly. And when I do male figures, they tend to be, it's like Pygmalion. I'm in love with them. So, but I'm not in love with the women. They're sort of surrogates for me. But I don't want to misrepresent the work. It's very important to me that they be everybody. So they're sort of blank people, but they're also me. So I turned her into a woman because that helps. And here's a close-up of her face. It's made with 2 layers of blue-on-clear flash glass that have been lovingly filed. I just want you to know how much that technique hurts. It's physically very, very painful, even though I lift weights. It's like, you got to stay in shape for this. Sometimes people have asked me my least favorite question. I'm just going to prep you for Q&A right now. I hate the question, why is your work so depressing? Because it's not depressing. I don't believe that you should tell the audience what they're supposed to feel. That's pretty criminal. But I would say, in terms of the expressions on the face, I really like faces that have a whole range of emotion. To me, a face like this is not despairing, but also hopeful. And I wouldn't ever want to add to the depression in the world that already exists. It's like, wow, what's your contribution to humanity? I helped add to the gross national depression. No, I think that when people look at images of saints and stained glass windows in churches, you're not just gawking at them because they're suffering. You're learning how to cope. Because what it does when you take an awful thing and make it into something that's beautiful to look at is you're sort of providing a way of transcending pain through physical beauty, if you believe that sort of thing, which I emphatically do. Emphatically. Most emphatically. This piece is, wow, that's probably about actual size. Maybe it's a little smaller. I think you can go see this one. It's at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York. It's been on display for a while. I got a computer in the year 2000. I thought for sure that I was one of those people that would never be able to operate a computer, probably because my dad gave me his Apple II, and I ended up throwing it out a window. You had to type code into those things. And I typed in something like, give me 10 resumes, and it was going to take about 30 years to do it, and it started smoking, so I just threw it out the window. So I really hesitated before getting a computer. And I ended up learning Photoshop really fast. And this was my first piece that used Photoshop to design it. Photoshop is absolutely phenomenal in terms of you can take all the elements and move them around and see 1,000 possibilities. The problem with Photoshop is that you can see too much almost. And this piece is called Snakes and Ladders. It was, perhaps you've noticed that I like to steal things. I think the politically correct term is appropriate. But I have certain very, very loose morals and rules for when it's appropriate and when it isn't. I prefer the artist to be long gone. I was really in love with this image here, and I wished that I'd thought of it myself. So I basically did a version of it, but I didn't feel comfortable actually making that image. It was too much like the original. Those are the same snakes. So somehow it mutated into this. I got really interested in images of levitation, looking at photographs by Gregory Crutzen. He's one of my favorite artists. And this is called Birdie Thief Strikes. I have a huge collection of images on my hard drive, and one folder is just called Raptor Attacks. So if you get any of these type of images, please email them to me. I had to do one myself. He's stealing the doll. This is a piece in the Victorian Albert Museum. It's called, what's it called? I can't remember. That's terrible. Well, it's got lots of birds in it, which is why I put it in the PowerPoint. This was Very influenced by the works of Walton Ford. Do you guys know Walton Ford? I should put one in the lecture next time. He went to RISD with me, and he's a wonderful artist. I know him. He's my friend on Facebook. But I mean, I knew him back in the day. There's nothing like looking at someone's artwork and getting insanely jealous. This piece was made because I was invited to be in an exhibition of self-portraits, and even though all my works are kind of self-portraits, at the same time, none of them are. So I wanted to do something on the theme of self-portrait that wasn't really a self-portrait, and this piece is called Autobiography. None of this happened to me, and none of it's me, but at the same time, it's sort of autobiographical. And this piece is called Speech Balloon. Well, I had the idea to work with the cartoon thing as a strategy for cutting out the glass. This piece, which is in the De Young in San Francisco, was really a journey, and I still have great ambivalence about this piece. I think I can say it because the owner has passed away and it's now in a public collection. I had a very hard time designing this so that it wasn't silly. And in some ways, the only way I could cope with an image of a dead animal in the road was to make it silly. So I worked really hard to make it not silly. This is my large collection of bulk failure. Like I said, I have pretty high standards, and I often find myself redesigning the piece from scratch and putting all the old pieces. I don't actually throw them in the trash can. I put them in those bulk failure things. And these are some of the examples of drawings I did when I felt sort of inhibited. So these are just silly ideas, like garbage to me. But I always end up liking my garbage, as I said. And there is a piece based on, on the drawing, this drawing. And I think there's a piece, yeah, this is a piece of it in progress. This is the piece that's downstairs called John Fletcher Hamlin is No More. I was very moved by the letter his compatriot sent home. They didn't have someone official to write these letters, so they just asked his friend, I guess, to write his mother to say that he'd died in the Battle of Petersburg. He lived through the whole war and died like days after his 21st birthday. Shot in the head in Petersburg, right? So I was thinking that the letter actually says, you know, basically, Dear Mrs. Hamlin, I'm sorry to say your son, John Fletcher, is no more. And I thought, oh my God, well, that's so direct, but it doesn't, I mean, what do you do? How do you understand those words? How could she possibly understand those words reading them? It spoke to me the patheticness of words. And so I wanted to say something about like letters. You know that famous Vermeer of the woman reading the letter? Sort of, I was trying to channel that. I hate to mention paintings that are better than mine, but there you go. Here's the detail. I don't need to show you details. Go look at it. There's the sketch. I spent so long researching the Civil War that I had to do it as a subject because there was nothing else in my head. I spent 2 years reading nothing but Civil War stuff. Oh, this has been misfiled. Sorry about that. These are the stages that piece went through to get less silly. This was the original inspiration, and this is it being really goofy, and less goofy, and then I think respectably not goofy. And pretty soon I'm going to bring up another PowerPoint to conclude because, like I said, there's two, and I think we're almost to the end of this one. I just want to prepare you emotionally. It's not like a technical glitch or anything. This piece is called Donkey Ducky Dream. Now, the difficulty with this piece was I had this figure, and this sort of classically drawn figure with this, oh my goodness, I just want to remind you people, this is really important. I'm so glad that I existed in the era of slides, because the color in slides was really perfect, and I'm really, really fussy about color. You need to dial down the yellows by about 40%, maybe 25%. The yellows are subtle. They are in no way as glaring as this. Anyway, so the challenge of this piece, after having designed this very classical figure on this classically done drapery and this really cartoony top part, was what on earth can you put in the background that is going to unite these two things? It took me a really long time. And right around that time, the Louis Vuitton bag was really popular, and there was one that had the different colors of the logo, and I thought, oh, that's perfect. I just made it into polka dots instead. Here's some of the doodles from that. I always doodle in ballpoint pen. This is a piece called Dog Mama. A friend of mine called me up and said that she had a dream that I did the best stained glass window ever, and it was Mary on the road to Bethlehem on a donkey. It's Dog Mama, like dogma. There's one of the original sketches for it. All right, and now PowerPoint 2. It would help if I started at the beginning of it. That's the last slide. Please don't look. We're getting there, people. Hang in there. I don't have a lot to say about this piece. I love it, but I don't know what to say about it other than it started out as a girl holding a target to her own chest. Somehow the target is no longer there, but there's a crown in the sky and a lot of really gorgeous telephone poles from South Philadelphia that they're painted, they're hand-painted on stencils. I think this has to do with being the chosen one. I did not do this on purpose, but that is based on Miss America's crown. I wanted to be an astronomer, too. On a more personal note, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I think I probably have you fooled into thinking this has been a very intimate, personal talk, but it really hasn't been. I used to suffer from truly horrific panic attacks that were threatening to make me housebound. Now, I ain't going to be housebound by no panic attack, but they were bad. And leaving the house, it got to the point where I could not really go to the corner store without a lot of advanced planning. And I sought help and ended up getting an alternative treatment that, had I known in advance, I never, ever, ever would have agreed to do, because my dad's a scientist, I wanted cognitive therapy. Somehow I ended up with a witch doctor, but she eventually cured me by rolling my eyeballs a lot, which to the point where it hurt. And if it's the placebo effect, well, long live the placebo effect. I was completely unconvinced after several treatments. I told her, she had me tapping on acupressure points. I came in and I said, it's not working. She said, all right, next week we're going to do this eyeball rolling thing. I'm like, yeah, whatever, all right. So I went in and we did it, and I left, and I was like, that was stupid. And I never had another panic attack again. Whatever my psychological frame of mind was completely irrelevant. It was like having a switch flicked in my brain. And I was geared up to have them. I was afraid to be afraid, but I didn't have the fear. And within a few weeks, I had recovered like 70% of my life, and I would say within a few years, like 99%. It was a real miracle, and if any of you have horrible panic attacks, I urge you to look into this, because it was so good. I think acupuncture might actually work in a similar way. I don't know what acupuncture does, but it makes me high, and it should be illegal. It's quite outstanding. This piece is downstairs, also one of my favorite pieces, and also a piece that caused a lot of post-production reassessment. I'm not always keen to make pieces like that. You think that especially if you're not an artist, you think, well, what you want to do is you want to make a really great piece, right? That's a no-brainer. But actually, when I make really great pieces now, then it's like you have to face like the day after you made the great piece, and it's like now I'm the person that had a heyday back in the day, and now it's over for me. And oh my God. So this piece I had a hard time with, and I will tell you, this is an example of a piece that got totally reconstructed. It was initially made entirely out of extraordinarily beautiful and expensive turquoise glass. That stuff must cost about $50 a square foot. That's all in the bulk failure box now, and this is all made with float glass, the ocean, that's been heavily painted with glass paint and with some turquoise cold paint as well. Now, as nice as and breathtakingly beautiful as that glass was, what I did to it was heinous, and it had to be destroyed. It takes a tough man to make a tender chicken. This piece is actually a cyclorama. If you could take it off the wall and bend it into a tube, and thank God there's security here that won't let you try, it would fold into this image. There's also only one ocean, although it's not nearly as impressive in the glass as it was in the drawing, which really does go on forever. But only one octopus, too. That was actually has a Civil War connection, too, in this really obscure way, and that is there's a cyclorama at Gettysburg, and I went and saw it, and I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. Here it is in construction. I had done the face literally like on a cocktail napkin. Actually, it looks like a lined paper. I did the body on a cocktail napkin. I have come to see this piece. I realized years later that the genesis for this was probably the movie Breaking the Waves. I don't know if any of you saw, who saw Breaking the Waves? Raise your hand. Most depressing movie ever, right? Yep, don't watch it twice. If you've seen it once, don't even go there a second time. But it's one of my favorite movies for that reason. And I think this girl looks like the character in that. I may have a close-up. Nope, sorry. You can go look. But I wanted to show you this in progress. I don't have a lot of progress shots. I do have more now. I was doing this piece at the same time. I said earlier on about having an assistant. I work with a fantastically skilled young artist named Annie Wilson. She works for me, and she either quits or I fire her, and then she comes back. It's never in anger. I love her. But she, there's really not steady work. The problem with me and assistants is twofold. One, I sing while I work, and it's a horrible abuse of an employee to sing in front of them. And I really like to sing loud show tunes. And second of all, I genuinely like making it myself, but because each step is predicated on the last step before it, there's not enough advanced planning to be able to hand her a bunch of stuff and say, go cut all this glass or something like that. So when I make pieces with an assistant, I have to have something planned in advance. This was done with Jean Prominski, who's now a glass artist in Seattle. And I made one drawing of the bottle, and she generated the bottles for the piece. The little figures are on a separate piece of glass, and I combined them after the fact. I didn't have any ideas for how the color would work at all, because as I told you before, I need to be surprised, and it needs to be a good surprise. I just want to say that this is not an existing image. This is done in Photoshop from all the faculty meeting notes. I don't have a picture of my parents' Danish cartoon books from Bo Jensen. How do you say that, Brenda? I was really, really obsessed with them. And I realized years later that I would look at these cartoons, and they were all in Danish, and I never once bothered to ask my parents to translate them. I was so enamored with the mysteriousness of not knowing what they meant that I never asked. And one thing that happens when you're in art school, especially in the post-deconstructivist world that we live in, is that the meaning of the work is given an enormous amount of weight. And by meaning, I mean the intellectual content of the work, not the, I mean, design is meaningful. Hello, let's please remember that. But I realized that I was in love with meaninglessness. So I decided I would design a piece that was incredibly meaningless, and here it is. It's called Enigmadusa. Here's some of the meaninglessness stuff. None of this means a thing. I want you to look at it long and hard. And there's Medusa. I was fascinated by the little roll of flab that women get right there. Here's some digital prints. This is a really big digital print of butterflies. Everything I do that's digital is native to the digital environment. There is some scanning involved, but I think sometimes when you see a Photoshop image by someone, that you imagine that it's a poster and that the original exists out there somewhere. Everything I do cannot exist except in Photoshop, which is why I did it in Photoshop. I'm going to make a point about all this work together in a minute, so bear with me. One day I was sitting on the toilet and I saw this, and I realized that it was a vision of Wyeth's Christina's World, right? It appeared before me as toothpaste. I love this painting. I'm not afraid to admit that in public. Maybe in art school I'd be afraid to admit it. But no, I just love it. What's not to love, right? So one day, having absolutely nothing better to do, I drew Christina, but I put her face in it. And I made the tiles there are the exact same source as those butterflies were. They've just been rearranged. And that print is probably almost a little bigger than that in real life. It was an edition of 5. It's one of my favorite things. The file for the floor, it was originally not in that horrendous perspective. It was just a flat image. So it had the potential to endlessly repeat. And if you're interested, the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia printed that out as silk yardage. It is so gorgeous, if I do say so myself. I don't take credit for it. I don't know where those stuff comes from, but it ain't me. And it was, I was just really pleased. When I was making these snowflakes, I was in that state of mind where I literally sat at the computer for so long that I forgot to pee. And I stood up and fell over because I had been there for hours and I could barely move. And I was so excited. See, I just want to make stuff like that. That's why I did that piece for the Museum of Arts and Design. They didn't have to tell me to remove the woman. Anyway, because I felt very strongly that this image and the butterflies had to be Photoshopped because this kind of delicate, lacy stuff cannot be done in glass. Okay, so the minute I tell myself, well, it can't be done in glass, then I have to rise to the challenge and try. So I ended up pairing Christina with the butterflies because everyone knows Christina's got some sort of medical problem, and her new medical problem is frontal lobe epilepsy. I thought I had that until I heard people with frontal lobe epilepsy have no sense of humor. That's not me. Around the same time, I discovered this French tabloid called Le Petit Journal from the turn of the century. And I was very relieved to discover it. I have now collected in digital files just about every one of their pictures, because now I never have to have another idea as long as I live. I'm just going to take these images and rework them. This is a monkey who's stolen these children and doesn't want these people, the rescuers, to come in there. I love that one. But wait, this is so awful. This is a woman committing suicide by grizzly bear. And this is the girl taking First Communion, spontaneously combusting. They're full of bell diving accidents and balloon disasters. It was sort of the weekly world news of its time. And I love the graphic qualities of these things. I just love them. So my idea was to turn all the men into women. So this is the death of someone, and I turned it into a woman. And I put it on that floor that was in Christina's world. Now, it doesn't reproduce anything like the Photoshop document. The floor, I mean, it's a whole new ball game with the glass, but I did want to try. Speaking of Le Petit Journal, this is an example of extreme cropping of a figure. This was right around the time we went into Iraq, and after having read all these books about the Civil War, I had war on my mind. This piece is called Monument, as in it's a monument to humans' great achievement of war, not. I am, by the way, sarcastic when you don't know it, and not sarcastic when you think I am being sarcastic. I just feel like I need to explain that. Think about that and get back to me. Quiz tomorrow. Anyway, so there's a line in a song that goes, "I stand upon this stupid platform that I built with my own hands." And I was sort of thinking about about war. I had originally designed it with a figure on top, which you will see in a minute, but I ended up chopping it off because to me, that was an important part of an anti-war statement. Anyway, like all stained glass windows, it was first done with a digital model. Since Gothic times, they've used digital models to work from. I don't have a field of skulls myself, so I made one, and I duplicated it, and I turned it into a pile, and then I printed it, and then I drew it. That is the most ass-backwards thing I ever heard, but that's how I did it. This is the figure that was going to go on top. One thing when reading about the Civil War, especially, was the number of women whose sons died, and of course the piece downstairs was about her son dying. She was financially dependent on her sons, ultimately. And I was just thinking, well, before women fought in war, pretty much it was all guys, and in some ways, women create life, men can only give their life. So I thought about how sad that was, and this figure was going to be on top of that pile of skulls. However, I will tell you, I am absolutely diametrically opposed to didacticism in art. I do not want to dictate to you how to think, and if you can't figure out for yourself that, war is probably not good, then I'm not going to be the one to convert you. I try very hard to keep them all open to interpretation to some extent, despite everything I've said today. You are going to go through that door and your memories will be erased. This piece is called Joan of Arc. I don't really know anything about Joan of Arc. I wouldn't want to pollute my mind with any sort of actual factual knowledge or anything. So Joan of Arc it is. I had been working with those layers of glass, dutifully turning them into color separations, when one of my students had the brilliant idea of, noticing that glass was actually transparent, and that when the layers didn't match up, it looked pretty good. So this piece was actually made by this skirt, is like a Rorschach blot, basically. The head justifies correctly. The feet, you will notice, I was still married. My husband said, the feet are in another zip code. So I had to cut the feet off here and move them over. But, right? that part didn't work so well. But I should have known with the red plate, right? Look at it. This is all done with hand tools. This is print done with the Maya program. Someone having an incredible epiphany on a toilet. It's really hard to do human figures that don't look like Gumbies, actually. And now we're getting into the more recent work. This piece is called You Are Here. In 2007, I taught in Scotland. And Scotland was a real life-changing experience for me. I got to lie down underneath a windmill and stare up at the blades whirling around. And I was fully clothed, just so you know. But this is a sort of as above, so below kind of image. I felt in some ways reborn in that moment. I'm not going to get into all the personal details, but it was that whole Scotland thing was, be careful of going to Scotland. You know what a thin place is? Bill Daly, the ceramicist, used to talk about this. Bill Daly is sort of a mentor of mine and a friend. A thin place is in Celtic lore where the separation between this world and the other world is especially thin. And so there's an awful lot of that going on in Caithness, the northernmost county of Scotland. And it's pretty amazing. Here's 3 of the rejected figures from that piece. I just could not get this one right. So I assembled them as studies because some things just shouldn't be in the bulk failure box forever. Speaking of being picky, and I just want you to know that I fully intellectually believe that being a perfectionist is a total killjoy way of being an artist. It's something that I really, really struggle with because I don't think that this is really to my benefit. So I did the drawing 3 times until I came up with this one, which I like. This was sort of based on one of those things where I had like a vision kind of thing, and that was this girl underneath a chandelier. I made the piece twice because I just could not get satisfied with it. I had this notion that I could do a color separation for real with the chandelier. I'll show you in a sec. Yeah. That I could take a file and make it into a dot screen and then use cyan, magenta, black, and yellow to make something that looked photographic. I think it actually looks a little better in reproduction than the glass piece does. This is a little more flattering than it really is. Although maybe, I don't know, maybe it's good, whatever. I do want to talk about the medium of stained glass in general, because right around the time that I discovered glass was transparent, I understood that the metaphor of light and how it acts on the human mind when you see a stained glass window. Obviously, we are all attracted to light. We can't help it. Without the sun, we wouldn't be here. Light can be very healing. It can also be damaging, but I mean, we use lasers for surgery now and seasonal affective disorder. You know, there was a whole book on light and healing from the Victorian age, which talks about like how the most agitated lunatic was soothed by a blue stained glass window. And it's like, I love the language. The catatonic person was healed by a red stained glass window. Anyway, the point is, with stained glass, you don't necessarily have to perceive it with your eyes, especially in architecture. You can feel it coming from within you, filling you up, and God knows we love to be full because we don't like to be empty, right? Being empty is bad. So you can feel light coming from within you when you look at a stained glass window because it warms you up. Try it on a train. Like if you're on the sunny side by accident, just close your eyes and you'll have a spectacular light show. It's really quite astounding. You'll see all kinds of different colors and shapes and all kinds of stuff. And you feel it because it's warming you up. So the response to a stained glass window is more than just with your eyeballs. You're responding to it with your whole body. And I think I once heard that photography is like the hardest easy medium or the easiest hard medium, and I always think that about stained glass. Stained glass, colored glass and colored light have such an enormous emotional impact, so profoundly beautiful without the artist manipulating it at all, as opposed to, say, ceramics. Sorry. No, so the point being that most of what people do with colored glass is they wreck it. It's really hard to improve on it. Anyway, so it is absolutely the most difficult thing to not ruin. I got very interested in stained glass as a subject for stained glass windows, and I ended up making this piece, which is called phosphenes. Those are the light show behind your eyelids when you close your eyes. And those radial patterns that I so love. I just want to point out I ran out of this blue glass here and here. I thought that was so audacious of me. Bright red. Yeah! This is one of my favorite faces that I ever did. The yellow is silver stain, by the way. Silver stain is the origin of the term stained glass. Silver stains glass the way coffee seeps into the fibers of your favorite white shirts. You put silver on glass and put it in an oven and fire it at about 1,000 degrees, and it actually sinks into the surface of the glass. The black stuff, what's happening is it adheres because the glass gets sticky and the paint has a little bit of glass frit in it, so it gets sticky and it sort of, sticks. Silver stain is staining the color of the glass, for real. So anything without silver stain isn't really stained glass. All right, speaking of Scotland, which I was, this drawing's downstairs. It was based on a place in Scotland called Whaligo Steps. I was thinking, there is a Le Petit Journal cover of a World War I widows throwing wreaths into the ocean for their dead seafaring husbands, I guess. An image I coveted, so I stole. I then changed it to this figure. This figure is a little bit too Led Zeppelin 4 for me, although I did make it in glass, and you'll see it in a second. This one seemed a lot more profound and expressive of what I was trying to get at. Big JPEG here. Because it's Scotland, there must be thistles. And here's a close-up of the face. The face is made with 2 layers of glass. I may have pictures. I hope I do. No, I'm sorry. It's made up of pink glass and silver stain. This is called Self-Portrait of Someone Else. Now I better have whoops, sorry. This is a window in Tattersall, England. Cromwell ordered all the stained glass in England to be destroyed. I don't know, they ran through there in horses with baseball bats, and they got rid of most of the stained glass, and they buried it in the churchyard. Now, someone really needs to get a PhD and write the paper on what the heck was going on. There's millions of examples of these really freakish collage windows, but they don't get a lot of play in books on stained glass or anything because they're basically horrifically bad restoration, like adamantly wrong. Word salad. Now, but actually, I think they're sort of the first postmodern mashups, and some of them are amazing. This church in Tattersall, whoever rebuilt it, I think did a better job than what was probably, sort of boring standard stained glass windows. I love those teardrops. Anyway, my piece has the exact same construction, the same cutting pattern for the most part. And I just wanted to explore some traditional glass painting techniques and other techniques and do kind of my own collage of scraps. Some of it is from the bulk failure boxes. All right, and now the last part of the lecture is the last show and stuff I'm working on now. This is my light table. It used to be that I would only be able to work on one piece at a time because it was self-evident to me that the most important piece that I was working on was the one I was working on now. But now I worked on a bunch at once. It's a big JPEG. Sorry. This is downstairs, so go look at it. This man was supposed to be the Minotaur, and he was supposed to have a bull on top of him, which you'll see in a minute. That's the layers separated, and the 4 possibilities for how they go together. This piece, which is not in the show, is called The Cold Genius. I had a problem making this one because I was so in love with this head. That's a print. I need to speed it up a notch, so I'm going to go quicker. These are 4 versions of it before I was satisfied with that. It took almost a year to make it. That piece, if you like it, it's at the Corning Museum. And here are the sources for the Sin Eater and the sketch. This is Blake and Cranach. Cranach has a baby in the mouth. He's weirder than me. And this is the piece with lights off. And that's it. This is it under construction. And I just want you to know that my assistant quit during this one. This is how it looked. I took this section apart and rebuilt it. Don't you love the whirling candy of death? Don't worry. Someday I'll size my JPEGs. I do know how to do that. Here's some doodles from the last American Craft Council meeting. This is the Minotaur with the man, and this is a tiny version of it. It's like this big. And those are the eyeballs from that. There's a great thing in the American Art Museum of those eye things. And this is how the large version ended up. Different man with a bull with birds. And there's the bull. This piece is called Mad Meg. This is all the scraps from all those pieces that weren't working, turned into an obelisk. This is the piece that's supposedly going to be in the glass dress show in Venice. It's called Nature, and I was just interested in doing an interior where every single thing sort of reflects the same pattern as the bushes outside. That's the piece apart. And lockdown. I had to lock myself in the studio for a year to produce that show. Just having pizzas shoved underneath the crack in the door. Those are the layers of the head. That's the source. If you know the photographer, don't tell him I stole it. I've never rendered a space before. I usually just slap designs on a cube. I was curious to know that if I could actually render space. So I tried. And she had to have neck surgery because her head was jammed into her torso. There's a print called Feral Child. This will be a stained glass window someday. And here's the stuff that's currently on my light table. These are 3 separate pieces, even though they look like they're interacting with each other. They probably will not be. There's the construction of that one head. Sorry, I'm way over time. And here's some drawings that I colored in Photoshop. The one on the right is part of a project I'm working on for Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. The one on the left, this is glass. And this is me taking things from the bulk failure box and testing them out for a layer on top of it. Here's a print I did recently. It just kind of popped out of me. And this is the Eastern State project that I'm currently working on. It's no longer an active prison, but a ruin, and they have an active artist installation program. So I'm going to show you some of the stuff from that. It's only a few more slides, and that's it. This is Brian Willett installing the first window. It's going to be 17 windows opening in March next year, so come on up. That's the woman that I showed you with the other figure. It's been made in glass, but it has not been soldered together yet. It's Andromeda. For many years, it was an excuse for Victorian porn. I'm doing some sculpture, cast glass sculpture. That's the clay positive. That's me with a koala bear in Australia. And here's some sketches that I call nudes that are dudes. They're mostly from my imagination. These are the prisoners in Eastern State. And I had to get source material for Jacob wrestling with the angel. Don't Google wrestling, you have to Google high school wrestling. That's it. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's time for questions or if you have any, but. How do I get the lace? You can glue lace to glass and sandblast it, but I decided that was cheating. So a lot of times I actually just hand do it with like a flexible shaft engraver. Sorry? Say that again. I draw it by hand.
Did you find it difficult in the Hamlin piece to be working basically black and white, or did it make any difference to you?
Do I find it difficult? Oh, no, I like working in black and white. I had a whole black and white phase. I think artists actually who work with color sort of cycle back and forth from doing a lot with color to sort of having no color. I've had other black and white times in my life. Yes? She asked, what context is it in the Eastern State Penitentiary? It's no longer an active prison. It's a tourist site with an artist residency program. So no, there's no prisoners there anymore. Al Capone was there once upon a time. It's in Philadelphia.
Judith, is everything that you have done, it's all with copper, not lead?
Not everything. I did lead for about 10, 12 years, but because it's so thick, it won't fit in the lead. Besides, there would be like a space in between it. Any other questions? All right, class dismissed. Thank you so much.